Welcome to Chronicle Stories TV. Before we begin, please drop a like and subscribe. The wind whispered through the tall California grass on the outskirts of Vallejo, rustling softly like secrets lost to time. It was December 20th, 1968. The country was distracted by Vietnam, civil rights, and the space race. But under the calm cover of a winter sky, something evil was about to awaken. That night, teenagers Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday pulled into a quiet gravel turnout along Lake Herman Road. It was a well-known lover's lane spot, a secluded patch far enough from the road to be private, yet close enough for headlights to catch passing cars. They were on their first official date, wrapped in that teenage mix of excitement and nerves. "Are you cold?" David asked, glancing at her as she rubbed her hands together. "A little," Betty Lou replied with a small smile, watching her breath curl into the air. "But it's nice out here." The night was still. No movement. No traffic. Only silence and the glow of the moon reflecting off the car's chrome. But suddenly, headlights. Another vehicle pulled up behind them. Not beside them. Behind them. The engine stayed on. "Who's that?" David muttered. The car door opened. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, crunched against the gravel. Then, a figure appeared. Shadowed. Silent. Before either teen could react, the figure raised a pistol. Cold. Controlled. No warning. Bang. David was shot in the head at close range. Betty Lou screamed and fled, but the killer followed, firing repeatedly. 5 bullets tore into her back. She collapsed just feet from the car. The killer didn't run. He calmly walked back to his car, started the engine, and disappeared into the darkness. The scene was discovered shortly before midnight. A passerby spotted the bodies and rushed to call the police. David was still breathing, barely, but died before help arrived. Betty Lou was already gone. 10 shell casings were recovered. No fingerprints. No tire tracks of value. Just 2 young lives stolen without reason. The newspapers reported it as a tragic double murder. Senseless. Brutal. But no one expected it to be the beginning of something far more sinister. 4 months, there was silence. Then, on July 4, 1969, just across the Carquinez Strait in Blue Rock Springs Park, another young couple parked in a quiet lot. Darlene Farron, 22, and Michael Mageau, 19, were enjoying a peaceful evening together. At around midnight, a car pulled up behind them. It left. Then it returned. A man got out with a flashlight and a 9mm pistol. He approached the passenger side. "Thought it was a cop," Michael later recalled. "The light was in our eyes." Suddenly, gunfire erupted. Michael was hit in the face, neck, and chest. Darlene was struck multiple times. The attacker walked back to his car, then returned, and shot them again to ensure the job was done. But this time, Michael survived. At 12:40 a.m., a call came into the Vallejo Police Department. A calm male voice said, "I want to report a double murder. If you go 1 mile east on Columbus Parkway, you'll find kids in a brown car. They were shot with a 9mm Luger. I also killed those kids last year. Goodbye." Click. The Zodiac had arrived. The morning after the Blue Rock Springs attack, Vallejo police were swarmed by reporters. A survivor, a confession call, and no suspect. It was a story that gripped the city. Michael Mageau, still dazed from his injuries, could only give a vague description. The shooter was a stocky white male, possibly in his late 20s or early 30s, wearing dark clothes and glasses. But that wasn't much to go on. 3 weeks later, the killer made his next move. On August 1, 1969, 3 major newspapers in the Bay Area, the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald, received nearly identical letters. Each was handwritten. Each opened with a cold announcement. "Dear editor, I am the killer of the 2 teenagers last Christmas at Lake Herman and the girl last 4th of July. But these weren't just confessions. They came with ciphers, complex symbols meant to be decoded. The killer demanded they be published on the front page or he would cruise around all weekend killing lone people in the night. He signed the letters with a symbol, a circle with a cross through it, like the sights of a rifle. The media dubbed him the Zodiac after he signed off one of his letters. "This is the Zodiac speaking." That phrase would become infamous. The cryptograms, composed of strange letters, circles, and triangles, puzzled everyone. Police brought in code breakers. Civilians tried their luck. Days passed without progress, until Donald and Betty Harden, a high school teacher and his wife, cracked one of the ciphers in their living room. It read, "I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest. Because man is the most dangerous animal of all." There was no name at the end. The Zodiac remained faceless. By the fall of 1969, the Zodiac Killer was a household name in California. The public was frightened. Police were frustrated. But the killer seemed energized by the attention, and he wasn't done. On September 27th, a young couple, Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard, were relaxing on the shore of Lake Berryessa. It was a sunny afternoon. Peaceful. Isolated. A place people came to fish, swim, and unwind. Then Brian noticed someone approaching from a distance. At first, he thought it was a hunter. The man wore dark clothing and a black hood over his head. On his chest, the Zodiac's cross-circle symbol, hand-drawn in white. He carried a gun and a long knife. Slowly, he walked up to them. "Don't be afraid," the man said in a calm voice. "I just won your car keys and some money. I escaped from a prison. I need to get to Mexico." Brian tried to keep him talking, thinking it was a robbery. But the man had rope. He ordered Cecilia to tie Brian's hands behind his back. Then he tied her, tightening the knots himself. Without warning, he pulled out the knife. He stabbed Brian 6 times. Then turned to Cecilia, and stabbed her 10 times. Before leaving, the killer walked to their car and used a black marker to write on the door. Vallejo. December 20th, 68. July 4th, 69. September 27th, 69, 6:30 p.m. By knife. He added the Zodiac symbol. At 7:40 p.m., a call came into Napa police. The same eerie voice said, "I want to report a murder." No, a double murder. They are 2 miles north of park headquarters. They were in a white Volkswagen Carmen Ghia. Click. Brian survived. Cecilia died 2 days later. October 11, 1969. San Francisco was buzzing as always, trolley bells, honking cars, footsteps echoing down streets lined with fog. But that Saturday night, the Zodiac Killer shifted his hunting ground from quiet parks and dark roads to the heart of the city. At around 9:55 p.m., a man flagged down a cab at the corner of Mason and Geary Streets. The driver, 29-year-old Paul Stein, a student and part-time cabbie, pulled over and picked him up. The destination was Washington and Maple, a quiet residential block in the Presidio Heights neighborhood. Paul drove the cab a few blocks, stopping at the corner. Then, without warning, the passenger pulled out a gun. One shot. Straight to the back of Paul's head. He slumped forward against the wheel, blood spilling onto the seat. The killer didn't flee. Instead, he calmly wiped down surfaces, then took Paul's wallet and keys. He even tore a piece of Paul's blood-stained shirt. Witnesses later said they saw him wiping the cab and walking away. Some thought it looked casual, like someone who lived there. 3 teenagers, watching from an upstairs window, quickly called the police. But the killer was already gone, fading into the night once again. When officers arrived, they initially believed the suspect was black, an error caused by a dispatch miscommunication. A white male who may have matched the real killer's description was even stopped briefly nearby, then let go. The Zodiac had escaped again. But he wasn't done taunting them. 2 days later, the San Francisco Chronicle received another letter. But this one was different. It included something horrifying. Taped to the top of the letter was a piece of Paul Stein's blood-stained shirt. There was no doubt anymore, this was real. The letter read, "This is the Zodiac speaking. I am the murderer of the taxi driver over by Washington St. plus Maple St. last night. To prove this, here is a piece of his shirt." He mocked the police. Claimed they almost caught him. called them fools, and promised more chaos to come. He spoke of planting bombs, of watching children, of wanting to shoot out tires and pick off school kids as they come bouncing out. Panic grew. Parents kept their children home from school. Newspapers blurred the line between caution and hysteria. But law enforcement, despite the mounting pressure, was no closer to catching the men who now seemed to kill for the thrill of it, and right to brag about it. Over the next few weeks, the Zodiac sent more letters. Some were cryptic. Others were playful. All were chilling. He threatened buses. He teased future ciphers. And he dared the police to stop him. In one letter, he wrote, "I am not afraid of the gas chamber, because it will send me to paradise all the sooner." And again, no fingerprints. No clear motive. No solid leads. Just a symbol, a letter, and the feeling that anyone could be next. As 1969 drew to a close, fear continued to grow across Northern California. The Zodiac Killer was no longer just a murderer. He was a phantom that haunted the public's imagination. He wasn't simply trying to get away with murder. He wanted the world to know he was doing it, and that he was smarter than everyone trying to stop him. On November 9th, a new letter arrived. This one was long, 7 pages. The tone had changed. He wasn't just taunting anymore. He was explaining himself. "This is the Zodiac speaking. School children make nice targets. I think I shall wipe out a school bus some morning. Just shoot out the front tire and pick off the kiddies as they come bouncing out." The public was horrified. Police patrols were assigned to school bus routes. Parents were paralyzed with fear. Even children knew the name Zodiac, though few understood just how real the danger was. The letter rambled, filled with strange phrases and coded thoughts. He talked about controlling slaves in the afterlife. About paradise. About how people would try to understand him, but never would. And then came a detail that caught investigators' attention. He described how he had avoided being caught in the Paul Stein murder. He claimed he walked past 2 officers who didn't recognize him because of a false description. Police began to wonder, was he one of them? Did he have insider knowledge? And then came the sketch. 3 teenagers who had witnessed the Presidio Heights murder helped create a composite image of the killer: white male, about 5 feet 10 inches, round face, glasses, and short, dark hair. The sketch was printed in newspapers everywhere. Police scoured records, questioned suspects, and combed through leads. But the Zodiac stayed one step ahead, always watching. By the early 1970s, investigators had followed hundreds of leads, interviewed dozens of suspects, and tracked mountains of tips. But one name kept resurfacing: Arthur Lee Allen. Allen was a former schoolteacher from Vallejo. A loner. Eccentric. Known for bizarre behavior, unsettling conversations, and a fascination with codes and killing. He had been fired from his teaching job for inappropriate behavior with children, and many who knew him were unnerved by his attitude. Detectives first became interested in Allen after a friend reported a disturbing conversation from years prior. Allen had allegedly said he wanted to kill people at random. That he would use a flashlight attached to a gun to blind his victims. That he would call himself Zodiac. When officers questioned him, Allen seemed nervous. He wore a Zodiac brand wristwatch, the same symbol used in the killer's letters. He admitted to owning bloody knives, but claimed they were from killing chickens. Police searched his trailer. They found weapons, strange writings, and small animals preserved in jars. But nothing that directly connected him to the crimes. No fingerprints matched. His handwriting didn't match the Zodiac letters either. And DNA tests, years later, would come back inconclusive. Still, suspicion lingered. Allen remained the most prominent suspect for decades. In fact, some detectives were convinced he was the Zodiac, despite the lack of hard evidence. But the Zodiac himself seemed to fade, as if watching from a distance. Then, suddenly, he struck again. It was March 22, 1970. South Lake Tahoe was blanketed in white, the last touch of winter clinging to the Sierra Nevada foothills. It was a tourist town, peaceful, calm. No one suspected the Zodiac Killer had made his way that far east. Until one woman vanished without a trace, 22-year-old Donna Lass was a nurse working at the Sahara Tahoe Hotel and Casino. She was popular, responsible, and never missed a shift. But that morning, her time card showed she'd clocked out at 1:50 a.m. She had left work and disappeared into the night. There were no signs of struggle. Her car remained untouched. Her apartment was undisturbed. She was simply gone. Months passed. No one had any leads. Then, on March 22, 1971, exactly 1 year after Donna's disappearance, a chilling postcard arrived at the offices of the San Francisco Chronicle. It was unlike the Zodiac's earlier messages. It had no cipher. It was a cut-and-paste collage, assembled from magazine letters like a ransom note. It read, "Sought victim 12. Peek through the pines. Pass Lake Tahoe areas." Signed with the familiar Zodiac crosshair. Was this Zodiac claiming responsibility for another murder? Or was it a hoax, someone playing copycat? Police couldn't say for sure. But the timing, the eerie wording, and the cryptic symbolism all matched his prior letters. Many believed the Zodiac had simply adapted, growing more secretive with time, finding new ways to kill without drawing attention. But again, just like before, no body was found. No suspects. And no answers. Donna Lass was never seen again. As 1971 faded into memory, so did the Zodiac's physical presence. No confirmed murders had occurred in over a year. But his voice, his sickening voice, kept echoing. The letters didn't stop. On January 29, 1974, the San Francisco Chronicle received yet another message. This one began differently. It opened with praise for a film. "I saw and think The Exorcist was the best satirical comedy that I have ever seen." He went on, mocking society, signing off once again as Zodiac, and ending the note with a bizarre symbol that no one could decipher. Stranger still, he included a new tally. N equals 37, SFPD equals 0. If it was to be believed, Zodiac was claiming responsibility for 37 victims. That number sent shivers through investigators. The confirmed count was far lower. Had he really killed that many? Or was it just a game? A lie meant to keep his legend alive? More letters followed. Some were angry, others philosophical. One signed off with a haunting line. "I am waiting for a good movie about me. Who will play me? I am now in control." But then, the letters stopped. Completely. By the late 1970s, the Zodiac Killer, this phantom who had terrorized an entire region, seemed to vanish. No more bodies. No more letters. Just silence. Had he died? Moved on? Was he living among the public, quietly watching the fear he'd created? No one knew. But what he left behind was fear. And mystery. And a case that would never quite rest. By the early 1980s, the Zodiac case had gone cold, but his legacy refused to fade. It wasn't just the murders or the ciphers. It was the mystery. The idea that someone so dangerous could vanish, untouched, was more terrifying than any conviction. Writers, filmmakers, and artists turned the Zodiac into a cultural figure. He became a symbol, not just of evil, but of the unknown. Police detectives were often asked if he had died or simply stopped killing. But the truth was more chilling. If he was alive, he could still be among the population, walking streets, sipping coffee, living an ordinary life. Newspapers ran anniversary articles. Books were published. Each new generation of investigators tried to reassemble the scattered puzzle pieces. Some believed he had continued killing under different names. Others thought he taunted police one last time, then slipped into the background. But the public never forgot. In 2007, the story got new life with the release of Zodiac, a film directed by David Fincher. It followed the true story of the investigation through the eyes of journalists and detectives who became obsessed with the case. The movie was praised for its realism, and for capturing the slow dread that had haunted those involved. And still, the case remained unsolved. The Zodiac had murdered at least 5 people. Claimed to have killed 37. And yet, there were no confirmed fingerprints, no verified identity, and no arrests. Just a name made from stars, a symbol made from crosshairs, and the knowledge that evil had once written letters to the world. As the 1990s turned to the 2000s, new technology began to change how cold cases were investigated. DNA analysis had become more advanced, able to detect genetic markers from microscopic biological material. San Francisco police retrieved stamps and envelopes from the original Zodiac letters and attempted to extract DNA. It was a delicate process. The evidence had aged over decades. Contamination was possible. Still, partial profiles were obtained. But even with this breakthrough, there was a problem: no match in national databases. Whoever Zodiac was, he had never submitted DNA. He'd never been arrested for a major crime. Or, perhaps the DNA wasn't his at all. Was the killer clever enough to avoid licking the envelopes? Did someone else mail them for him? The mystery deepened. In the meantime, the public's obsession with the case grew louder. True crime forums, podcasts, and documentaries kept the story alive. New suspects were proposed, dozens of them. Some seemed credible. Others bordered on fantasy. But one suspect always seemed to circle back into the spotlight: Arthur Lee Allen. Even after his death in 1992, people questioned whether he was the Zodiac. But DNA from the letters didn't match Allen. Neither did his handwriting. And yet, those who had met him swore he was capable. Frustration mounted. There were so many leads, so many names, and yet, no resolution. Decades later, a cold truth remained: the Zodiac Killer had outlasted his pursuers. He had become a ghost. In 2021, more than 50 years after the first confirmed Zodiac murder, a group calling themselves the Casebreakers stepped forward with a bold announcement. They claimed they had solved the case. The group, made up of former FBI agents, forensic experts, and journalists, held a press conference and revealed their suspect, Gary Francis Post, a deceased Air Force veteran and house painter from California. Their theory was detailed. They pointed to physical evidence: scars on Post's forehead that seemed to match police sketches, and alleged messages in the Zodiac ciphers that referenced Post's name when letters were removed. They even claimed that Post H. lines blared: Zodiac Killer identified. Social media exploded with speculation, arguments, and renewed obsession. But law enforcement didn't confirm it. The FBI quietly responded, saying the case remained open and that there was no official conclusion. The San Francisco Police Department said the evidence presented was inconclusive and that the investigation was ongoing. Many found the Casebreakers' evidence compelling, but many others saw it as circumstantial at best. Post had died in 2018, and he could no longer speak for himself. Was this the truth? A final chapter in a case that had haunted generations? Or was it yet another theory added to a growing pile of maybes? One thing was certain: the public still wanted answers. And the Zodiac still had none to give. Over the decades, the Zodiac investigation grew into one of the largest files in American criminal history. Thousands of pages. Dozens of suspects. And countless theories. Some suspects were ordinary. Others were terrifying. There was Rick Marshall, a projectionist who lived in San Francisco and allegedly owned a typewriter and paper matching Zodiac's letters. There was Lawrence Kane, a man arrested for stalking women, who had a brain injury and lived near several Zodiac crime scenes. Then there was Arthur Lee Allen, the favorite suspect of lead investigator Dave Toschi. The man who owned Zodiac brand watches, who made disturbing comments, and who fit the physical description. Yet, all forensic evidence failed to link him definitively. As time passed, armchair detectives filled online forums with their own suspects. Some claimed the Zodiac was a group, not a single man. Others believed he was a former military cryptographer. A few thought he may have moved out of state, and continued killing under new names. One theory even tied the Zodiac to the Golden State Killer, who was caught in 2018 through genetic genealogy. If that technology worked once, could it unmask the Zodiac too? So far, it hasn't. But the theory remains alive, that somewhere, hidden deep within those aging envelopes and faded stamps, a clue exists. A strand of DNA. A smudge of saliva. Something that could finally shatter the silence. Until then, the Zodiac remains a phantom. A puzzle without a solution. And that's what makes him so terrifying. What kind of person sends letters to newspapers after committing murder? Who brags, taunts, and dares the police to stop him, knowing they can't? To understand the Zodiac Killer, criminal profilers over the decades have tried to build a psychological profile. What they found was chilling. The Zodiac wasn't impulsive. He planned carefully. He selected remote locations. He came equipped with weapons, tools, and even a costume at Lake Berryessa. He created coded ciphers. He monitored news coverage. He waited months, sometimes years, between attacks or letters. That kind of control, it's rare. He didn't seem driven by a specific target or grievance. His victims were strangers. Couples. A cab driver. A nurse. His motive wasn't personal, it was about power. He wanted attention. Each letter seemed like a performance. He chose his words deliberately, inserting fear and misdirection. One moment he mocked the police. The next he spoke of philosophy, or paradise, or slaves in the afterlife. It wasn't always clear what he truly believed, or if he believed anything at all. Some experts compared him to narcissists or sociopaths, someone without empathy, but with a need to be recognized. Others saw him as a control-obsessed sadist, who got more satisfaction from scaring the public than from killing. He created his own myth, a symbol, a name, and a voice, and turned himself into a ghost story that would never go away. That, perhaps, was his real goal. From the very beginning, the Zodiac Killer knew how to use the media. He didn't just kill, he announced his killings. He sent letters, made phone calls, mailed in pieces of his victims' shirts. He wanted headlines. And he got them. Every time a Zodiac letter appeared in the Chronicle or the Examiner, the city froze. People skipped late-night drives. School buses were followed by patrol cars. Men stopped taking jogs in the park. And every news broadcast began with a word that was quickly burned into the minds of every Californian. Zodiac. The media amplified the terror. News anchors read his letters aloud. Papers printed his cryptograms on the front page. Reporters speculated live on air. Who was he? Where would he strike next? Was he watching now? And that was the worst part, he probably was watching. Police criticized the media at times, saying the coverage may have encouraged him. But others believed the exposure helped, bringing in tips, keeping pressure on the investigation, and making it harder for him to operate unnoticed. Either way, Zodiac had achieved what few criminals ever had. He became a celebrity killer. Known by a symbol, feared by millions, and elevated by the very headlines meant to stop him. He turned murder into a message. And the media helped deliver it. By the mid-1970s, the Zodiac's voice began to fade. His last confirmed letter, known as the Exorcist letter, arrived in 1974. In it, he mocked the hit film The Exorcist, calling it a comedy, and signed off once again with his classic crosshair symbol and a new twist. Me equals 37. SFPD equals 0 inch. If he was telling the truth, that meant there were 32 murders no one had ever connected to him. But no evidence ever surfaced to support that claim. Still, the letter left behind an uneasy feeling. Was he done killing, or just done talking? Over the next few years, several other letters surfaced, each claiming to be from the Zodiac. Some were believed to be real. Others were obvious hoaxes. But none of them had the same weight, the same sick charm, as the original communications. In one 1978 letter, the writer threatened new killings and referenced past murders. But handwriting analysis was inconclusive. DNA couldn't yet be tested. The police couldn't confirm its authenticity. In another strange message from 1987, the writer included a new cipher, unsolved to this day, and referenced the Zodiac by name. Again, investigators couldn't verify it. And that was the pattern. For decades, letters would occasionally appear, claiming the name Zodiac. But none with the eerie precision and controlled madness of the original killer. It was like the voice had grown tired, or changed hosts. Or simply walked away forever. More than 50 years have passed since that cold night on Lake Herman Road, the night Zodiac took his first known victims. The question still hangs in the air like fog over the bay: is he still alive? If Zodiac was in his mid-30s in 1969, he would be in his 90s today, if he's alive at all. Many believe he died long ago, taking his secrets to the grave. Others think he stopped killing, perhaps satisfied that he had etched his name into history and haunted enough lives to last forever. Some believe he may have been arrested under another name, or institutionalized, or even living quietly, watching documentaries about himself, reading books that speculate on his identity. The idea that a man who brought so much pain could simply fade into the background is chilling. And yet, that's exactly what may have happened. Despite breakthroughs in forensic science, despite thousands of hours of investigation, despite endless public fascination, no one knows for sure who he was. And maybe that's what he wanted all along. To live forever, not in flesh and blood, but in myth. In fear. In questions that never get answered. He didn't just want to kill. He wanted to be remembered. Behind the myth and mystery, behind the ciphers and headlines, are the lives cut tragically short. Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday were teenagers full of dreams, sitting in a car on a quiet country road, never imagining their first date would end in murder. Darlene Ferrin and Michael Mageau were a young couple enjoying a summer evening when terror struck. Michael survived, but the trauma stayed with him forever. Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were lovers at a peaceful lake, their quiet day shattered by a man in a hood and knife. Paul Stein was a hard-working taxi driver, just doing his job when he was shot in a city neighborhood. And Donna Lass, she vanished without a trace, leaving only a chilling postcard hinting at her fate. Each victim was more than a statistic. They were sons and daughters, friends and neighbors. Their families faced decades of grief, questions, and unanswered prayers. The Zodiac Killer's reign wasn't just about fear, it was about lost futures, broken hearts, and lives forever changed. And that's what true crime stories often overlook. The human cost behind the headlines. The Zodiac Killer left behind a riddle wrapped in terror. He was never caught. His identity remains a mystery. But his story shaped true crime forever. He was one of the first to turn killing into a game played through newspapers and ciphers. He influenced how killers communicate with police, how media covers crime, and how the public consumes horror. His story reminds us of the limits of technology, the complexities of human evil, and the enduring power of fear. As we look back, the Zodiac Killer is a ghost story made real, a shadow lingering in the fog over California's hills. Maybe one day, the final piece of the puzzle will emerge. Until then, the Zodiac Killer remains a haunting whisper in history, a reminder that some mysteries refuse to die. The first moments after the Lake Herman Road murders were a blur of frantic police activity. Officers arrived on the scene to find two young bodies slumped near a car, their lives brutally stolen in silence. Detective Jack Mulinox was one of the first to respond. It was a quiet night until that call, he would later recall. We had no idea what we were dealing with. The police quickly cordoned off the area and began searching for clues. But the killer had left little behind, no fingerprints, no eyewitnesses, and no apparent motive. Usually, in a murder like this, Mulinox said, there's some kind of connection between victims and suspect. This? Nothing. The press latched on quickly, sensationalizing the story and calling it a lover's lane shooting. Yet, the police could only confirm one thing: whoever had done this was cold, methodical, and possibly not done. Over the next days, the department was flooded with tips and calls. Some led nowhere. Others were bizarre or false leads. Officers worked overtime, but the puzzle remained unsolved. Then, weeks later, the call from the killer himself changed everything. On July 5, 1969, less than 24 hours after the Blue Rock Springs shooting, Vallejo police received a chilling phone call. The voice on the line was calm, almost bored. "This is the Zodiac speaking," he said. The officer on duty nearly dropped the receiver. "I'm the one who did it," the voice continued. "I shot those kids last night. I like killing people because it's so much fun." The caller went on to give cryptic clues about his identity and future crimes, all delivered in a cold, emotionless tone. "You'll never catch me," he said. The call lasted only a few minutes, but it shattered the case's early silence. Now, the killer was taunting the police and the public directly. Every officer knew this was no ordinary murderer, it was a predator playing a dangerous game. Within hours of receiving the Zodiac's first letter containing a cipher, authorities enlisted codebreakers to crack the mysterious symbols. Amateur cryptographers, professional linguists, and hobbyists around the country scrambled to decode the message. One couple, Donald and Betty Harden, spent late nights in their California home analyzing the code. Using pencil, paper, and sheer patience, they uncovered its dark message. When the solution became public, it sent chills through readers. I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game. The cipher revealed a killer who reveled in his acts. He was proud, arrogant, and wanted recognition. And the hardest part? The code was only one piece of a puzzle. He sent more, each more complex. As news spread about the Zodiac and his cryptic letters, fear gripped Northern California communities. Parents kept their children indoors. Couples avoided secluded spots. Even city streets felt unsafe. Store owners reported a drop in evening business. Joggers ran in groups. Late-night radio shows devoted hours to the topic. Schools added extra security. Police increased patrols in areas deemed high risk. Local newspapers published safety tips and encouraged readers to report suspicious activity. In Vallejo, citizens organized neighborhood watches. But the Zodiac thrived on the panic. He became a ghost stalking the fears of everyday people. Michael Mageau's survival changed the investigation. Shot multiple times during the Blue Rock Springs attack, he fought to stay alive. In the hospital, he was weak but lucid enough to describe the killer. I remember his face, Michael said during a police lineup. He had glasses, dark hair, and a strange way of moving. Like he was nervous. His testimony gave police the first real description of the Zodiac, a white male, about 5 feet 8 inches to 6 feet tall, wearing glasses. Michael's bravery and detailed recollection became vital, but the killer was still out there. September 27, 1969, began as an ordinary day at Lake Berryessa. Couples and families enjoyed the warm sun, unaware of the shadow approaching. Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard, a young couple, parked near the water's edge, chatting and laughing. Suddenly, a man appeared, wearing a black hood with the infamous cross-circle symbol drawn in white. He carried a large knife. Brian's voice trembled as he later recounted. He told us not to be afraid, but the moment he pulled out the knife, everything changed. He was forced to tie his own hands behind his back. Cecilia did the same. Then, without mercy, the attacker stabbed them both, Brian 6 times, Cecilia 10. The killer then calmly wrote a message on their car door. Vallejo, December 20, 68, July 4, 69, September 27, 69, 6:30 p.m. by knife with the Zodiac symbol. Despite the brutality, Brian survived and ran for help. Cecilia succumbed to her injuries 2 days later. This attack cemented the killer's signature, cold, methodical, and symbolic. On October 11, 1969, the Zodiac Killer shifted from rural areas to the heart of San Francisco. Taxi driver Paul Stein picked up a passenger near Mason and Geary Streets. Witnesses later described a man in his late 20s, wearing glasses and a dark jacket. Paul drove the men to the quiet neighborhood of Presidio Heights. Suddenly, the passenger pulled out a gun and fired once, striking Paul in the head. The killer wiped the cab's interior and took a piece of Paul's blood-stained shirt. 3 teenagers witnessed a man cleaning a cab and called the police immediately. Paul Stein was pronounced dead at the hospital. The brutal murder in a well-populated area shocked the city and escalated the Zodiac's infamy. Shortly after the Presidio murder, the San Francisco Chronicle received another letter. This one was different. The killer mocked the police and media, but added a disturbing new threat. He called himself the Red Phantom and claimed he would begin attacking school children. The letter read, "I am going to start killing school children because it is too much fun." The city erupted in fear. School officials urged caution. Police assigned patrols along bus routes. The Zodiac's taunts had become more terrifying, his game growing ever darker. With mounting pressure, police intensified efforts to find the Zodiac. Every tip was pursued. Witness statements were re-examined. Composite sketches were circulated. A man named Arthur Lee Allen soon came under suspicion. Known for his strange behavior, fascination with ciphers, and owning a Zodiac watch, Allen raised red flags. Police questioned him multiple times. He failed several polygraphs but denied involvement. However, no direct evidence linked Allen to the crimes. Allen's arrest never came, but he remained a suspect for decades. Behind the headlines were families torn apart. Parents of victims faced years of grief, uncertainty, and public scrutiny. Michael Mageau, survivor of the Blue Rock Springs attack, struggled with PTSD and fear. Cecilia Shepard's family mourned a bright young woman taken too soon. Paul Stein's widow and child faced loss in the spotlight. Each family attended funerals, fought media attention, and sought justice. Their pain was a constant reminder of the Zodiac's true cost. After the initial cipher was solved, the Zodiac sent two more coded messages, the so-called Z32 and Z13 ciphers. But unlike the first, these codes have never been fully cracked. Experts and amateurs alike have pored over the letters for decades. Many believe the ciphers contain chilling clues or hidden confessions. One cryptography enthusiast said, "Each symbol could represent a letter, a phrase, or even a personal signature." The Zodiac wanted to communicate, but only to those who could unlock his mind. The mystery of these unsolved ciphers remains one of the most tantalizing aspects of the case. Besides letters, the Zodiac also made phone calls to police and media, further haunting the investigation. One such call came shortly after the Lake Berryessa attack, where the killer calmly confessed the crime in a chilling tone. Police often had difficulty tracing these calls. The killer's voice was reportedly calm, sometimes playful, but always cold. During one call, he laughed softly before threatening future attacks. This unseen voice became an auditory ghost, deepening the public's unease. Despite intense efforts, many suspects were cleared or ruled out. Some were falsely accused by media frenzy. Others were mistaken eyewitness accounts. One suspect was even arrested due to handwriting similarities but was later released. False confessions emerged, and some hoax letters flooded in, confusing investigators further. These dead ends weighed heavily on detectives, who often felt the killer was always one step ahead. As years passed, forensic science advanced, offering hope. Investigators revisited old evidence using DNA testing, fingerprint analysis, and handwriting experts. In 2002, the FBI announced testing on Zodiac letters had produced a partial DNA profile. Unfortunately, it did not match any known suspects. Despite technological progress, the Zodiac's identity remained elusive. Media coverage turned Zodiac from a criminal into a cultural icon. Newspapers, television, and later films sensationalized the case. Books and documentaries analyzed his cryptic letters, motives, and suspects. While media kept public interest alive, some critics argue it glamorized a violent murderer. Still, the Zodiac story became one of true crime's most enduring tales. In November 1969, the Zodiac sent his most famous cipher, now called the Z340. Containing 340 symbols arranged in a complex grid, it baffled cryptologists for decades. Despite countless attempts, the cipher resisted all efforts to decode it. The message was a puzzle wrapped in darkness, teasing investigators and the public alike. It wasn't until 2020 that a team of amateur codebreakers cracked the cipher, revealing a chilling message, but no nom. The Zodiac wrote, "I hope you are having lots of fun trying to catch me. That wasn't me on the TV show. I am not afraid of the gas chamber because it will send me to paradise. I am waiting for a good movie about me." The message confirmed the killer's arrogance and obsession with media attention, but still left his true identity hidden. The Zodiac Killer transformed the way communities viewed safety. Across California, people locked doors earlier, watched neighbors more closely, and avoided lonely roads. Businesses posted warnings, schools doubled security. In some neighborhoods, groups formed patrols, walking streets at night armed with flashlights. The public's vigilance was a double-edged sword, increased safety on one hand, but constant fear on the other. The Zodiac's reign left a lasting mark on community psychology. Arthur Lee Allen remained the prime suspect for years. Investigators dug into his past, discovering disturbing behavior. Friends reported he owned a flashlight gun setup, similar to Zodiac's description. He reportedly talked about killing people and claimed to be the Zodiac. Yet, crucial evidence was missing. His fingerprints didn't match, and DNA from letters excluded him. Allen died in 1992, leaving the case to haunt others. In recent years, cold case detectives have reopened files. Using genetic genealogy, the same tech that caught the Golden State Killer, they hope to finally identify Zodiac. Samples from stamps and envelopes are being analyzed again. Private groups and enthusiasts crowdsource data, scan archives, and revisit suspects. Despite the challenges, hope persists that modern science can end the decades-long mystery. The Zodiac Killer represents a dark chapter in American history. His crimes shocked a generation, his letters inspired fear and fascination. His identity remains unknown, a ghost who refuses to be caught. The story is a cautionary tale of obsession, terror, and the human desire to solve the unsolvable. As long as people ask, who was the Zodiac, his shadow will linger. In the midst of the mystery, it's vital to remember the victims, lives forever changed by the Zodiac. Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday were teenagers dreaming of their futures. Darlene Ferrin and Michael Mageau were a young couple enjoying a summer night. Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were out for a peaceful afternoon by the lake. Paul Stein was a hard-working taxi driver supporting his family. Donna Lass vanished mysteriously, leaving a chilling void. Their stories remind us of the human cost behind the headlines. Zodiac's letters often grew darker. He once called himself the Red Phantom and threatened attacks on schoolchildren. The city lived in terror, fearing the killer's next move. Schools increased security, parents stayed vigilant. His taunts forced communities into heightened alert. Zodiac's story inspired books, movies, and music. David Fincher's 2007 film Zodiac brought the story to a new generation. True crime podcasts and documentaries dissect the case regularly. His symbol has appeared in art and media, sometimes glorifying, sometimes condemning. The fascination is both a tribute and a warning. Countless suspects have been proposed over the decades. Some had motives, others opportunities. From Arthur Lee Allen to Rick Marshall to Lawrence Kane, theories abound. Some suggest Zodiac was a group, others a lone genius. New evidence reignites debate, but none has conclusively solved the case. The Zodiac Killer changed how society perceives violent crime. He blurred lines between criminal act and public spectacle. His messages forced law enforcement to rethink profiling and media cooperation. His case remains a benchmark for cold case investigations. And, more than anything, he remains a symbol of fear, an enigma that refuses to be solved. Even as the years passed, the Zodiac occasionally resurfaced through letters. In 1978, he sent a cryptic message hinting at continued violence. The letter was laced with arrogance and menace, as if to say, "I'm still here. Watching. Waiting." But after that, silence. No confirmed crimes. No verifiable communications. His voice faded, but the fear remained. The 21st century brought new hope. Cold case units reopened investigations with advanced forensic tools. Genetic genealogy became a powerful weapon, solving cases once deemed impossible. The Zodiac case's DNA evidence was re-examined, but no matches emerged. Private investigators and enthusiasts combed through archives and surveillance footage, piecing together clues. The hunt continues, because some mysteries demand answers. The Zodiac Killer changed how police approach serial crimes. His ability to manipulate media and public opinion revealed new challenges. Law enforcement developed better communication strategies. Profiling techniques improved, helping catch future killers. The Zodiac case serves as a study in perseverance, adaptation, and the limits of justice. Though decades have passed, the Zodiac's shadow lingers. His crimes inspired fear and fascination. He created a legend, one that warns against complacency and highlights the darkness in humanity. His symbol remains etched in American crime history. And the questions he left behind continue to haunt us. At the end of the day, the Zodiac Killer remains an unsolved puzzle. No name. No trial. No closure. His story is a testament to the complexities of evil, the limits of technology, and the human need for justice. Until the final piece falls into place, the Zodiac remains a ghost in the night, waiting, watching, and reminding us that some mysteries never die.